Why is community so important? To approach that, my slant to that question would be, let's take a look at bad community around us, particular context in Chicago. I think that when we as human beings don't function how we were originally created to function, then there's deviations of what God intended, and then what happens is that you have bad community, or in other words, lack of community. I preface it that way to say, like, if we are not created to be independent, and in our culture, that's something so exalted and glorified. Any slant or subculture glorifies that to the extreme. You see it in hip hop, right? You're supposed to be this individual, and all your identity, your praise, your worth is saying, who are you in particular, not who are you in particular to this whole community or context. And we see that flesh out in so many different ways that harbors the selfishness inside of us. And so many times people will say, well, what's up with the communities in Chicago? Why are so many of them bad or violent? I think really when it comes down to it, community is so important because it's one piece or one person helping another person to collectively confront whatever's in front of them. And so what I see in the communities, speaking particularly not in the body of Christ context, but in the context of just people being located in the same geographic area like a neighborhood of Chicago, is that when there's this idea that we're not looking out for one another, but looking out for self, you have all the things that we always hear about. You have the gangs, the drugs, all that's driven by functioning in a way that we're not created to function, which is, let me get mine and forget everybody else. So why is community so important? Because it's how we're supposed to function. Our value and worth is not just boiled down to what we individually have been given, but how that individual gift from God and us being human and being given gifts or talents or the ability to love or whatever virtue you want to talk about, that only has value when seen in the context of what we call in Christendom, right, in the Bible, the body of Christ. Specifically why the body of Christ is so important, or community in that context, is that I believe it becomes a sign, the aroma of Christ to our broken communities. So it's like, if we continue to function in such a way that we're just valuing individuals and not a community or body, or if we say, I'm a Christian and yet I don't love the body of Christ, what we're saying to our bad, struggling, dysfunctional communities is, I'm just like you. You value yourself as a drug dealer, or as a phenomenal artist, or as a phenomenal person, or a well-educated person, and all that it banks on individualism. What is a shot to that context or that mentality is when the body of Christ says we value one another even more so than we actually value ourselves. And collectively, we come together. And I think that that's how God shows his remnant of his chosen people, how community becomes an evangelistic kind of beacon of light to broken communities. So for the Christian to value his body becomes almost as, or even more important as valuing his own worth. To value his body's worth in a community becomes the greatest light that they can shine in a broken community without God as the head. So community is evangelistic as well as nurturing to the people within it. And that's why I would say community is how we were intended to function. And thus we have to follow that pattern to be healthy witnesses to broken communities.